Okay, so let's open the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting for August 24th, 2016. It's July, excuse me, I'm off by a month. July 27th, okay, I'm reading the wrong date.
Posted correctly.
Yep, okay, sorry, July 27th, 2016. That's why I'm getting off this chair, I don't know what date it is. Okay, we'll start the public meeting. First, a couple of announcements. Please silence your phones and take any extraneous conversations out in the hall. And we begin the meeting, we are recording this meeting, and if you want to record any of it, please let us know before you start recording. So we'll start with the election of officers. And we'll start with the chair. Nominations for chair. I nominate Andy Bennett.
I second.
Okay, now Andy, before we go through this vote,
Sure.
did you want to wait until the next meeting to start, or you just want to take over now?
No, if I could wait for the next meeting to start. It's up to you. What would you like?
Well, I'll sit through this one and let you have it next time.
Empty room looks good. Huh?
Yeah.
It's a feeling.
So if you make
I'm
that
taking
motion,
notes.
I would say, just to make sure that it's clear that it'll continue, is move that Andy Bennett start as chair as of the, let me say,
August 20th,
the next meeting.
August 10, yeah.
August 10th meeting, so that way it's clear that Ernie will go through tonight and then Andy will start that.
Okay.
Andy is-
I make that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thanks, Andy. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you, Ernie.
Okay.
Well, you did accept, Andy.
I will say, not for nothing, that, I mean, Ernie has been, how long you've been chair? 6 years?
Since for, oh God, at least that long.
At least
I think.
6 years.
I think it's been longer than that.
It's been a job well done for that time.
Excellent job.
So,
Well, thank you very much. But I will say, I've had great commissioners, including the present bunch, which I'm always very thrilled to work with, and we seem to all work well together. Have great staff, excellent note-taking and minutes. And what's really helped, I think, the commission work so well is most of our professionals that come before us now try to come in with no waivers needed projects. So they're the ones that have to tell them, no, you can't put the pool there, you can't have that fence there, you got to put it back here. And we don't have, I remember the days we used to have to do that from this end of the table. So it's really great to have that. Yeah, but not nearly so much as we used to. So thanks to you guys too,
Definitely.
and then the public, especially Ms. Molden here, for keeping us on the ball and reminding us of the regs and everything when needed. So I've had a tremendous amount of help to be a chair. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you, Ernie.
It's been fun.
see Ernie in a different chair.
Yeah, I'm going to move out of this middle table. Yay. Go back to be a little more ornery than I am now. I'm not planning to leave the commission, just.
No. You can nap down here, though. No one even knows it.
Don't go. Yeah, don't give away our secrets. We still do need to.
Yeah, we need a vice chair, so-
Especially now that that position's been vacated.
Do I have a nomination for vice chair?
I nominate Ernie.
No, I decline.
Like I said, we see Andy's attendance would go way down.
What's coming up tonight? Oh, I think I'm
I feel a
sick.
little sick today.
I'd actually like to nominate Ashley.
Second.
Second that nomination.
Okay, you okay with that?
I am okay with that.
Okay.
Good choice.
Commencing on the 10th or,
Yeah, it would take effect the same day.
Yeah.
okay.
The following meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations.
Yay, Ashley.
I think you'll do a good job, Ashley.
Thanks.
The only trick is you gotta grow your hair out to look like Andy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Not an easy thing to do.
right.
It's going up, though. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, with that done finally. Public comment, anything from the public on matters not before us tonight? Okay, seeing not, we go to the public hearing, notices of intent. The following, Schneider, both Schneiders at One Brock's Court, and the Laz Family Trust at 20 Wacoit Road are continued to August 10th. So with that,
And then number 3 is to the.
Oh.
the land bank.
the land bank is to the 24th. Thanks for catching that, Jeff. So with that, we go to Holt at 98 Squam Road.
So just for the record, this is one of the sites we conducted our field viewing at this week.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, this is the second public hearing for the notice of intent for the proposed pool and fence and cabana structure located within 100 feet of bordering and isolated vegetated wetland. All of the structures are beyond 50 feet from the wetland boundaries, and the only waiver that we've requested is for the 2-foot separation to groundwater, which would be for the bottom of the pool, and temporary dewatering outside of the buffer zone just during construction, not permanent dewatering. There were some questions at the last hearing about the isolated vegetated wetland C, which is shown here, which hadn't been on previous plans, and I submitted correspondence to the commission that included the former plan, the former order of conditions, and the certificate of compliance for that garage structure, which is now within 50 feet of that wetland. And again, we still, with the proposed project, respect the 50-foot for all of the proposed features. What we have done is, recognizing the concern of no disturb buffer or the interest to the wetland, I have proposed that we would put some shrubs in this portion of the lawn, shown in red right here, native shrubs to increase that buffer zone and decrease the lawn area that's next to that garage. We want to leave enough area to obviously still be able to get around that garage and maintain the structure. And with that, I hope that addressed the outstanding. Brian Madden, who had done the delineation, also provided some additional information to Jeff in terms of data forms. So I think and hope that you have everything you need on this application. I have to try to address any outstanding questions or concerns.
So if I can answer that really quickly, just to kind of fill in the gaps for the record a little bit. The filing that came up in question for that was originally reviewed and field verified by our consultant as well. And the small isolated vegetated wetland, at the point that it was done, was not picked up both by whoever did the original delineation and by Laurentide. I think looking back at the kind of the time frame for some of it, and given the vegetation that we saw there, I think I could rationalize how it happened. I'm not saying that it's a good situation that it did, but I think that the information's been provided to us, and I think that it's been verified in this case that what's on the paper now is the correct delineation. It's kind of interesting because we're kind of stuck in a little bit of a box where a small isolated wetland that was missed, was permitted, was reviewed by our consultant, was missed again, and then permits were issued, and then was in compliance when the certificate of compliance came in. Now a new application has come in where they're showing a new resource area that, I mean, to be perfectly frank, was just missed by multiple parties. So I don't really, there's no way for us to go back in time and, you know, force something to move or take punitive action against it. I mean, it's not nothing that the applicant did or was a purposeful deceit or anything by any means. I mean, it was reviewed by our technical consultant, so I think we're making lemonade out of a little bit of a lemon, you know?
Well, based on what we saw yesterday, it's easy to see how it was missed, you know?
As I said at the first meeting, it's not very obvious.
Right.
It's squam is difficult soils,
Yeah.
varying vegetation, and it was dry right now. It's not like it's a very, very obvious type of resource area, so I can certainly see as well how.
I think there's something too that Brian Madden and I spoke a little bit at length about this, and are kind of in agreement that depending on the time of year that you went to that site to delineate that wetland would be easier to notice or harder to notice. Like when we were there on one day, the dominant vegetation that you see are black cherry trees and grapevines, both of which are not typical wetland plants, and they're both upland indicators for the plant list. The plants that Brian did in the plot in the wetland are definitely wetland plants. I think his delineation's pretty spot on. And after looking at it again, I wish we would have caught it the first time. But
So with that, I mean, given that they've got a cert and everything, then everything is there, and that we're not gonna mess with that, I take it.
well, I don't think we have a legal basis.
Yeah,
to do
thing to
so.
stand on, yeah.
Also, I mean, I was there in 2012 or 11, and there was no sprinklers. There was just grass was burned. So I think now looking at it, where the sprinkler systems is, I think there's been some regrowth in that area that may help out, kind of revitalize that area.
Could be.
I'm speculating, but I just remember being there
Yeah, it's
in a
I don't
winter
know.
time, and I didn't see anything.
It's tough to rewind the clock 4 years. To that.
Do we have like a soils map for this area?
I didn't file one, but I could obviously provide a copy of either that portion of Oladale's map or the USDA survey from '79.
How small a scale do those soil surveys go, though? I mean, because
It's
something
so variable
up
out
in
here. I mean, I can
Swan,
tell you that I did soil tests back, I want to say maybe even late '90s on this property and out in here, and it's highly variable. There's ice contact deposits from the glacier in this area, so I don't know that again, if I would hope we wouldn't have to keep the hearing open for something like that, but I would obviously be willing to do that research and provide that information if it's something you felt that you needed in order to make a decision. Then that would be something that we could do. Brian?
Yeah,
No, please.
I did review the soil maps, and unfortunately, something of that size wouldn't ever pick up.
Yeah.
But the other systems did show up. And, I was mentioning this, you don't know how drainage patterns change or whether or not, there was some level of compaction there. I mean, it appears to be a perched groundwater situation going on. So even subtle changes can make that.
Did you look at soils out there?
Exactly, yeah, that was the primary factor I looked at. And then once I got in there, started noticing a lot more wetland vegetation, shrub-wise. And this was performed in April, so it's before leaf out. So I from the driveway, had seen some signs of saturation at the surface, but no standing water at that time.
I guess it just makes me nervous to grant a waiver for groundwater separation, given the funny little wetland patterns, and not knowing if we're gonna punch through something. I don't know. If the soil map won't give us the detail, then
I don't think it would give you that level of detail, though. In response, if I may, to the one comment, I don't think that a pool of this size set partially into the groundwater is going to have in the overall squam size of a system. I don't see an adverse impact that's going to happen there.
And the one thing too with the USGS soil mapping, and I wish it was more frequent. The last map was published in '79, and that was data that was probably reviewed in the mid-'70s. And I think anyone would tell you Nantucket has significantly changed in that time, and drainage has changed, and a lot of earth has been moved. And they're accurate to a point, but it's similar to GIS, where most of it is done from some ground truthing and then aerial mapping as well. And it's big units that cover a big scale, and you don't get little pocket depressions just because of the scale of the map. I mean, all of Nantucket, I think, in the USGS report is on, I want to say it's on 13 11 by 17 sheets, maybe 14. It's not very many, so that's the whole island broken up and then mapped. So it's tough scale.
It's 1 to 20,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Well,
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the commission or the public? Yeah, Ms. McKinnon or Malden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emily Wollman for the Nantucket Land Council. I know I wasn't here for the last hearing, but I think you all heard from Cormac about how concerned we were about the situation, and I was just given the additional wetland forms by Jeff that were submitted earlier. So sorry, I was just reviewing them real quick. Can you just show me where, or maybe Brian, where this observation plot was?
Yeah, it was basically within the interior.
Of this one?
C.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Labeled
Okay.
C and labeled
Gotcha.
C.
Okay.
And so you'll note there, I only listed the dominant shrubs that were present.
Okay. And then just out of curiosity, this is just sort of upland in this area, and then it just transitions back into another little isolated?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a hump there. There's a crab apple tree right on the edge over here. There's a lot more black cherry saplings, and then this system is a lot lower. There's a pretty good topo break there.
Okay. Okay.
And this area is just very shallow.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that our big concern is seeing something like this happen and go through the whole process, getting a cert, and being concerned about it happening again, and wanting to, while we're here looking at this, at least from our perspective as the public, wanting to kind of hear something from the commission and the administrator about what can be done to actively try and prevent this from happening again. And I know it's hard to say because you had a consultant reviewing it, but maybe your consultant can miss something in the future. Maybe there's nothing more that can be done, but I just think from our perspective it would be nice to hear sort of a discussion about whether there are any other checks and balances that can be put in place. And if we know who the original wetland flagger was, that missed it as well. But other than that, so I guess I would sort of appreciate hearing a little bit more of a discussion about whether there's anything else that can be done to try to make sure this doesn't happen. But then also, I did just have a follow-up question. I'm not sure if it was discussed last time, but about the proposed pool and the dewatering that's going to be done. I only remember reading in the narrative that it was going to be dewatered over towards Wollman Road, but I am just a little concerned about how long the dewatering would go on for, and again, that high water table, if Wollman Road experiences a lot of flooding, so I was just going to ask for a little bit more information on where that water would be pumped to.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to address that. We have a big meadow field up in this area, which is also part of where the leach system is, and then the natural grade falls back this way. So we would pump up to, put a square of hay bales in, pump the water there, and then let it filter back across the meadow area. The length of time wouldn't be more than a couple of weeks maximum.
Okay.
It's just long enough to excavate, form up the pool, and pour it. and let it cure. So I mean, no more than, I wouldn't expect it to be more than a couple weeks, and then backfill, and they'll put a hydrostatic valve in the bottom of the pool so that if there's groundwater could actually come into the pool. Now, that's not a problem once the pool is full, and then it has the weight to resist, but that's the way they, design these pools in these situations so that you don't get cracking or uplift. So that gives the water a place to go if it needs to.
And any idea of this, what time of year it would be done?
The off-season, so I don't know if you know, but there's quite a demand for pools on Nantucket these days, and I'm told that getting contractors for them but that, the idea is that I'm actually meeting next week with 2 pool contractors out there with the owners, so they're hoping to move forward as soon as possible.
Okay, but it'll definitely be discharged, obviously, out of the
Yeah,
commission's jurisdiction.
absolutely. Yeah, there's a large area on Locust and it's a bit higher, as you can see from the topography on the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Well, on Emily's other concern about missing wetlands, I guess it's an interesting question, because this is a case where we know it happened, but we don't know if it happens. I mean, if this is the one that it's happened, then it's actually quite a rare event, and it's sort of like, do we expect the town to have enough snowplows for the 100 years winter, or is that just spending money that doesn't need to be spent and you deal with it? And is this that situation where how much effort do we want to put into something that rarely ever happens?
If I could maybe add, Mr. Chairman, from our side as professional consultants, we do everything to make sure that we don't get surprised, and that we've uncovered all resource areas related to all of your resource areas, so that you don't have a situation that then maybe even your consultant goes out and then brings something up. So we make every effort and that's how this happens, good diligence. And if it does, it's just a pure, I think, rare occasion and genuine, oversight. Not any, everyone's doing the best they can. And I think that's the best that we can probably address that.
Yeah, and I would just say, we don't know definitively if there was something out there previously. I mean, it could have been influenced by construction activities or post-construction activities, some changing of the drainage patterns. And again, it appears to be just a perch system. The wetland vegetation, the shrubs that you see in there, are commonplace, they're found in uplands all the time. It was just for the fact that I saw a little bit of staining going on in the middle of the spring, which kind of led me to start digging around in there. So.
Okay. Jeff, you did mention who did the original delineation out there. Do you remember?
I mean, the original work was done through Blackwell's office, so I don't know.
It was Black.
Who if they,
David. Well, see, that's generally very reliable.
Yeah, we're
Very reliable.
Hiring people that are doing this for a long time. And it's just, it's a very marginal, difficult area. So
Yeah,
like
you wouldn't
say,
think.
it wasn't like missing some very, very odd. This really took, I think, a lot of investigation, sleuthing on Brian's part to make sure that we got it right this time.
I mean, if anything, you look at that and I think it's the one thing I think that might have been a giveaway is just how thick it actually is. I mean, it is so thick of vegetation, you rarely see that on the uplands, where you just can't even see.
The grape too, obviously.
Yeah, the grape
right
is
now,
all
this
over,
time
yeah.
of year is,
Thick with grape.
blocks out everything.
I think some of these too, like I said earlier, sometimes time of year can play a big influence on identifying those areas, in times of the year when it is wetter and you can see other signs you don't normally see. Vegetation hasn't leafed out, right now, all you see is grape and cherry. And it's not something that would strike you offhand. I mean, I think it's the first time I can remember both a paid consultant and then a third-party paid consultant both missing a resource area. And we have a lot of resource areas that flags get moved and adjusted and, tweaked, and sometimes it's moving it 2 feet, and sometimes it's moving it 10 feet. But it's the first time that I can recall missing a small isolated area. I don't think it happens regularly. I mean, I think it's definitely the extreme exception.
Well, I think that, given everything that's said, obviously you guys are doing the best job that you can, we know that. Isolated incident, I don't think we can, ask the owners, burden the owners by trying to do some retroactive,
No.
action on this. So, I'm gonna chalk it up to, you know what, every once in a while, you're human, you make a mistake, and it sounds like 2 people did, so it was obviously not obvious at all. So I'm gonna make a motion to approve as,
Well, first we have to close the hearing.
So close the hearing.
You ready to close?
Yeah.
We have what we need to close, Jeff. Thanks, Emily. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments here, well,
Well, I think we should institute the Memorial Deer Stalker Sherlock Holmes Award and award it to Brian for.
finding this thing, yeah. Okay, so all in favor of closing the hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, then we're all the way down to 78 Wollman Road LLC. That's 78 Wollman Road.
Once again, for the applicant, Art Gasparo, this is again the second hearing for work in the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland, and also within natural heritage jurisdiction. We continued the hearing, waiting for natural heritage, and I just received their letter right when I got to the meeting, signing off on the proposal as having no adverse effect or impact. So I'd be happy to either go over further. Again, the work is all proposed outside of the 25-foot buffer zone. The structures are all well outside of the 50-foot buffer zone, and we're going to do our best to preserve existing vegetation where we can and work within the area that you see there. Try to maintain some buffer to Wollman Road and the sand track in Fargo Way.
Okay.
keeping all the trees. it looks like.
Well, they had, like I mentioned at the last hearing, they actually had me survey the trees and then kind of design the houses around the significant trees. And I think the hardest part might be piling dirt and figuring out, they're gonna have to clear some areas to build this, but there's some really beautiful trees in there.
If I could make a suggestion, hire Bartlett or Poldrose or somebody to go out and put some tree protection zones out on this project, just from
I'll pass that on.
Because any kind of fill is going to adversely impact. I mean, those are beautiful stand of white oak. And
Really nice, yeah. And the owners really appreciate it. They've spent a couple of years looking at the property and trying to figure. And again, this is part of a much larger parcel. And we're just working here in this area.
I guess my only question, I asked this last time, what sort of understory cutting are you doing in the buffer zone? Or are you not doing?
Well, I would, if I may, the sill fence will be the absolute delineation of any work in understory cutting.
Okay.
So there'll be nothing that happens closer than 25 feet, understory or not. And then, yes, I'm sure there will be some selective clearing underneath the trees to open up, some of the areas. And that's why I've shown, they have where they're proposing the landscape. Maybe almost very little will happen, but I wanted to be sure that I established an approved limit of activity so that and I'll stake out that line and they'll put a silt fence in. So there'll have to obviously be a small bit of clearing just to get that fence in along that line, but that will delineate all activity. And I've labeled it limit of work on the plan.
Any other questions or comments from the commission or the public? Okay, seeing none. Jeff, do we have everything we need to close the hearing?
We do.
Art, you ready to close?
Yes, please.
Do I have a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the Third Time Trust at 141A Cliff Road.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors, representing the applicant, Third Time Trust. This is a notice of intent application for a property located at 41A Cliff Road, which is a parcel of land on the north side of Cliff Road, essentially on the top of the bluff or elevated area along Cliff Road, in the vicinity, just outside of the town area, coming onto Cliff Road. The area itself is outside of any designated flood zone area. It's outside of any mapped endangered plant, endangered species. We do have, it is essentially a currently developed lot with a coastal bank which runs along the backside of the lawn on the subject property. So the picture that you see here, the fence is essentially the coastal bank, and the lot is developed with a lawn area up into that area, typical to a lot of the homes up along that side of the cliff. The area itself is a coastal bank due to the fact that it does touch a resource area on the low side, which is the flood zone, quite a bit below where this project is on the low side of the landform. Does touch the bottom of the bank, therefore the top, by definition, is a coastal bank. The applicant is proposing to take the existing structure, elevate it, move it on the lot to the west property line, construct a new foundation system underneath the structure, and then also expand the structure in certain areas. So the plan that you see with the application is the yellow line, the green line is the picket fence of the coastal bank. The yellow line is the 25-foot buffer zone. The other yellow line is the 50, and then essentially the 100 is almost somewhat immaterial. It's outside, but the entire lot is essentially within the 100. So the limit of the current developed area is essentially the lawn area. There is a enclosed porch, and there is a built boardwalk deck area along the backside of the project. The project itself will not extend any further towards the coastal bank, and in fact, it'll be pulled back by a de minimis amount, only a few feet. In the area in the 25 that currently exists, there's a footprint of 362 square feet currently inside the 25-foot setback. The proposed footprint is 464, so there is an increase within that setback of the building itself. Also an increase in the 50-foot setback because the building is, as it's being moved, it's also then being expanded. No change in grade with regard to the back area, the lawn area, the fence area is basically proposed to stay the same. The project itself does require waivers because of the construction within the 25 and the construction within the 50-foot setback also. We have submitted a waiver request under the premise that the project will not adversely impact the interest identified in the bylaw, and there'll be no other reasonable conditions or alternatives that will allow the project to proceed in compliance with the regulation. Essentially saying that the lot's already developed, there is a substantial structure already in the regulated area, and we're simply going to continue to do that. The lot is limited with regard to the amount of area it can come forward. If you'll notice, the site does have a small sliver which goes out to Cliff Road, but it's essentially unbuildable. And the way this property is currently laid out is, although this is a residential property here, there's a residential home here, a residential home here, they're all serviced by one single loop driveway. It's not a subdivision road, it's actually just a private way, which is a driveway that comes in and comes out and services this home and this home here. Actually, the owner of this property and this property was the contract purchaser of this one. So it's the same, essentially the same person, entity now owns these three parcels. There is another developed, this is a developed lot here, this is a developed lot here, in the similar fashion that you see proposed, existing and proposed under the current application. I do not have a DEP file number, I guess, Jeff, for some reason. I didn't realize that till I left the office today. So I do not have a DEP file number. We do not need any correspondence or sign off from National Heritage, but we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have with regard to the application.
Any questions for Paul?
I got one. Do you know what the increase in area inside the 25?
Yeah, it would be the difference between the 362 and the 464. Is that 102? Two? Yeah, okay. 102 square feet then. And as I said, it's de minimis. I mean, it does come forward by 2 feet, but it's for all practical purposes, it's really essentially acting in the same way it does now.
Well, is the porch and the second floor deck on the new one, on the previous one?
No, that's part of that. That's the majority of the 100.
Yeah,
that's the majority of the 102. But that is set back further than the current developed portion. But it's not. There currently out there right now is an enclosed porch here with the boardwalk deck off the back of it.
Question about the top of the bank. In one of the photos, it looks like, I don't know, they must put a crazy like deer fence up at some point in the year. It's this.
Oh yeah, that one was taken earlier than
Yeah.
the thing. Yeah.
And then another one, it looks like it might be Japanese knotweed that's like right on the other side of the picket
Okay.
fence.
Okay.
Would they be willing to do any work and some native restoration to that area?
I mean, we can't close today. I'd be happy to. I wouldn't see why they would not be, and I'd be happy to ask the question. Like I said, we're not going to be able to close the meeting today anyway. So I don't know I never know if the deer fence would actually be there. So on the other side of the fence,
It
just
looks
some
like the other
restoration.
side, but then it looks like, I mean, they have roses.
Oh,
and
this
then
is the earlier photo, right? Then this one was later. This is later.
This must be, yeah.
This is earlier.
Before
This is-
things leaf out.
Yeah.
And then it looks like what must be there is knotweed on the other side of the fence and roses. And
Okay.
would
How
they-
far back off the fence would we be talking? I mean, onto the.
It's just kind of unclear to me where the fence is, I guess, in this photo.
I think it's right
in
there.
between.
Yeah, right in
I
there.
mean,
Yeah.
a little bit off the fence, hopefully.
Is that deer? Oh, are you talking about this picture, actually?
This picture is an earlier. This is when they were first looking at buying the lot. I had some
Yeah.
older pictures, and I thought that they looked better on that one.
Nice. Right, that's just temporary.
Yeah.
What's on this plan?
Right.
Yeah.
So
And that's what happens.
that's right on the edge.
Right, that
where
the
it
pig-
drops down. So I
Yeah.
don't know to what extent they'd be able to do restoration. on
But
a
even
steep
just
state.
replace the roses and treat the knotweed right on the other side of
Yeah,
the
just
fence.
adjacent to the fence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that off the bank still, or is that knotweed maybe right on the top of the bank?
Well, I mean, I think the top of the bank is essentially the back side of the fence, because that's
Right,
where
and
it
I mean,
does.
they're obviously putting deer fence back there so they can remediate to wherever those deer fence stakes
Yeah.
are going to.
Yeah, you just don't want to destabilize that bank.
Oh, no, I don't think they'd be able to, they would do that.
The house move foundation will take care of that.
Well, I'm just thinking that they'd have to be careful taking that knotweed out of there to make sure something else got in there right away.
I think it would have to be all done by hand. I mean, the only
Right.
way you'd be able to do it is by hand.
Have to clip and
I
drip it,
think that
yeah.
something in the interim 2 weeks that Paul
Yeah.
can certainly ask
Yeah.
the question and try
Yeah.
to quantify what
Yeah.
the work would entail and,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Look
and
into
then
that.
obviously what restorative plantings they'd want to put in if
Okay.
nothing else came back in. So it'd be a normal knotweed removal project for us being added. So
Because that's a well-vegetated, stable bank, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's not it.
It's not
yeah,
an
that's
eroding
that's a
bank.
stable bank. Then what you've got is developed properties on the low side of it, cliff off of,
Is it
no,
Jefferson?
beach, North Beach.
North Beach?
North Beach.
North Beach.
Yeah, 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 so that's all, and then you get some of the subdivisions that come in off, there's a few little cul-de-sacs that come,
Yeah, back there, yeah.
that come in off of that side, so. Okay.
Okay, so, you want to continue for 2 weeks,
Yes,
Paul?
please.
And before we do that, any other questions from the commission or the public? Okay, so unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this until the next meeting, until the 24th.
Thank you.
Or no, the 10th. Thanks, Paul. Okay, 102 Wollman Road Nominee Trust at 102 Wollman Road. Again, no file number here.
Recuse myself from this one.
Yeah, yep.
Brian Madden from LEC Environmental, representing the applicants 102 Wallwinnet Road Nominee Trust. Proposed application is for proposed beach stairs, elevated boardwalk to a walking path. The proposed beach stairs will extend off of an existing lawn area up over the top of the coastal bank, extend for about 43 feet down the well-vegetated bank. And then it transitions to coastal dune. The coastal dune, the upper portion of the coastal dune at the toe of the bank is also well-vegetated by similar shrubs, mainly bayberry, arrowwood, things like that. I submitted some photographs as part of the application so that the beach stairs and the boardwalk will be elevated 12 to 18 inches off the grade to allow for the vegetation to grow underneath. Once it kind of reaches past the shrub line, it's going to transition to a 3-foot wide footpath that it will extend primarily through. It's just basically beach grass with some scattered eastern red cedar seedlings. Again, that's kind of illustrated in the photographs that we submitted. The flood zone, land subject to coastal storm flow, which does intercept the coastal bank, and we do basically where it transitions from the shrub vegetation to the beach grass vegetation. That's the natural heritage polygon. So we are awaiting natural heritage response on that end. And a file number 10.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Any questions for Brian?
Is it just like a little footpath that they take, or is it like as cleared as like a lawnmower length?
I'm talking
They
from the
currently
house.
use, yeah, to get around. the
Aside from the vegetated wetland itself, is primarily all lawn area.
Okay.
So all the construction will take place, outside of buffer zone areas, at least for assemblage of materials to transport. And there's plenty of room over there to stay outside of any of the buffer zones to that isolated vegetated wetland. But yeah, there's plenty of lawn area.
Any other questions?
I'm assuming no handrail on the lower level section?
Yeah, that's not the intent yet. I'm trying to keep it 18 inches and avoid that.
Yeah.
Anything from the public?
Well, thank you for no handrail.
The vegetation will keep you in.
Yeah, keep it light.
Well, if there's, we don't have a file number again, huh?
Yeah, the last three here were missing file numbers and natural heritage ones for the last three. So
Okay.
we can hear them and ask questions, but we're not making a lot of progress.
Well, if there's no other questions or comments, Brian, you want to continue?
Please to the
2 weeks? Okay, well, unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue this till the 10th. Okay, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay. Four Quays Pasture Road Trust of Four Quays Pasture Road.
Must be vacation time at DEP. Natural areas looking for everyone's stuff. So, couple of additional ones. I'll steal.
Yeah.
You guys. Two.
Brian Madden, from LEC, representing the applicant, Four Quays Pasture Nominee Trust. The proposed project involves a proposed pool, associated decking, and a pool fence and pool equipment with some minimal regrading. The entire work activity occurs within an existing lawn area. An existing deck is basically off the northeast portion of the house. It's just going to be squared off and transitioned down to a bluestone patio in the proposed pool. The proposed pool decking, pool equipment are all outside of the 50-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands located within the western portion of the site. There's also an existing conservation restriction on the property that's shown on the site plan that's held by the Nantucket Land Council. Due to the fact that the proposed deck is being squared off and to allow a couple steps off of the deck, the proposed fence, perimeter fence, encroaches a couple feet into the 50-foot buffer zone within the existing lawn area. And it basically follows that 50-foot buffer zone before it curves back down to the southeast. So there's some minimal encroachment, but the proposed work, we have requested a waiver based on the layout. That encroachment into the 50-foot, again, by a couple of feet is unavoidable, but it won't result in any adverse effect to the resource area, the downgrading resource area. There's plenty of wildlife migration corridors left on site. And again, the entire deck, the entire fence is within existing lawn limits. It's actually pulled in a little bit interior so it doesn't encroach on the backside of the lawn. So we are proposing a few native shrubs up in that area just to fill in the lawn. And the proposed pool will have a 2-foot separation to high groundwater. There's a pretty significant drop off down to the wetlands.
Any questions for Brian?
So, not to try to redesign anything, but is this proposed deck, does this have some sort of significance with the architecture in that it can't be pulled back to get this space? You know, I mean, if this deck was pulled back, you could run the fence to
Yeah,
50.
I think it was just teed off of, squared off the existing house. That was the only reason for that. And even the steps themselves are kind of sunk in a little bit so they don't protrude out beyond that. I mean, if the commission, certainly would want it outside the 50-foot, I can take that back to the architect, see what can be accomplished there.
See, we kind of hold the line on that one
Yeah.
pretty often,
Yeah.
you know? And it seems like a pretty easy fix.
It's like a couple of feet, I know.
It looks like the deck is all right, it's just the fence.
Yeah, I think it's just not having that fence right up.
So you walk off into
Yeah,
Oh,
you
walk
can
into the
walk
fence,
right
yeah.
into it. So.
I mean, I would even like to, leave the steps, if they could jog it back, so we get them the 50 as soon as
Yeah, it
possible.
looks like
Yeah.
there
And
is
what if they
some,
did that, if they just jogged it back to the edge of the deck and then moved it over or something?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think we could make that work.
Because I don't know, I think I've been on this property. They have the raised patio, but then don't they have all these other patios and walkways and maybe a fence in the backyard?
Back out here, there's a garden area, but that side of the house, I think I may have grabbed one photograph. Yeah, so this is maybe not the best photograph, but comes off at a weird angle right now. It's basically right like that, and a diagonal. You saw that, but that's kind of how it looks like right now. So they were just planning to square that off, but I think there's enough
Right, but
room
they
for
could,
some adjustment.
right, they could square it off of the apex rather than at the base. And the other question is, since I notice it's lawn,
Yep.
when you have proposed landscaping, these sort of bushes, do you know what they're going to be?
I can confirm that as part of this application. We'll make sure they're native. Yeah, the intent is to kind of fill in that lawn area, but still allow for some access around.
Yeah.
Right, because the edge of lawn is like an edge of landscaping, in fact, back here, right? It's not grass, it's like hydrangea and,
Yeah, there's whole.
yeah.
There's not a whole lot of like planted up.
Okay, anything else from the commission or from the public? If not, we don't have a file number again, so Brian, would you like to continue to the 10th?
Yes, just one comment before I do so. This is also with the Natural Heritage, so we are still waiting for them. It's exempt from MISA review, however, we still need a response under the Wetlands Protection Act. So. But yes, I would like to continue to the 10th.
Unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this till the 10th. Okay, thanks. Okay. The land bank at 4 Pulpus Harbor Road.
All right, just for the record, Mr. Chairman, this is one of the other spots that we went this Monday as part of our regular field viewings to check on conditions and not to bring it up, but it's important to remember that this is a filing that stemmed from the enforcement, and this was essentially the order to action from the commission was to put together the restoration plan and get it permitted. So this is kind of the conclusion of the enforcement into restoration. Just couldn't find that word. Sorry.
Excellent. And I just want to thank everybody for their patience on this and kind of letting things develop a little bit without jumping into it too fast.
I would like to thank everyone for that, too. I'm Rachel Freeman. I'm representing the Nantucket Land Bank, and we are here to propose a restoration plan for our Holly Farm property, which is approximately 21 acres. It is located on the southern shore of Nantucket Harbor, southeast shore of Nantucket Harbor. The whole property itself encompasses everything from beach to salt marsh to bordering vegetated wetland, and fresh marsh. It's a series of ditches have been created in the area, so there's inland bank. It is also within land subject to coastal storm flowage and is within natural heritage estimated habitat. So there's quite a large number of resources areas on the site. Just to refresh your memory, in case you've forgotten, in April, approximately 80% of the holly trees at the site, which was about 491 trees, which were American hollies, were topped. And there was a whole series of areas that were brush cut as well. They're shown here in this tiny small figure along an easement and adjacent to the holly trees. All of this was done without a permit, and it all falls within various resource areas, mostly, various resource areas. So if you can look, the buffer zones are shown here. These are the 25, 50, and 100-foot buffers, and all of the work occurred within buffer zones or within the resource area themselves. And so as a result, we have gone and we have documented the extent of the brush cutting and the topping of the holly trees, and the damage to the section of the easement that crosses the wetland. And in addition, there was about 12 cedar trees that were removed on the site. And so we initially set up that we would document the extent of the damage, and then we'd come back with a restoration plan. So our current restoration plan begins with site cleanup, which will involve clearing all wood chips and excess brush from the areas where there's been actual cutting. And that's mostly along the easement and along the, it's really 286 and 288 Pulpus roads on the northern boundaries of those properties that abut the land bank. And we will be removing the brush and the wood chips, but we're not intending to smooth that area at all. We're going to go with the existing topography. And then we're looking at removing invasive species that are in the existing holly stand as well as on the edge of the holly stand. After we've completed that work this summer, we're hoping to come in the fall and perform a variety of planting, which I have. Well, if I don't have the picture here, it's right back there. Let me go grab that.
Which picture are you looking for?
Just the landscape plan, 1 and 2. Here is a copy of. And so we are looking at reestablishing a series of native species, both along the borders of 288 and 286, and along the easement, which is actually partially on the property at, I believe, 290 Pulpus Road. I think I have that correct. And I've been in touch with Marianne Boeski, and she and I are going to meet on the site to go over and review what we're intending to do. The species that we proposed are common native species in the area, things like bayberry, highbush blueberry, arrowwood, black cherry, sweet pepper bush, winterberry, and mailberry. As you get closer to the wetland ends, mailberry, winterberry, and sweet pepper bush, sort of, are more dominant wetland species. So in the wetter areas, we were thinking about using those plants, and in the more upland areas, and highbush blueberry. In the more upland areas, we'd be looking to put arrowwood and black cherry and bayberry. The other thing that we're looking to do is to reestablish some cedar trees in the area, because about 15 were removed. About 12 were removed, but we're looking to put about 15 back in. And I would say that one thing that we've thought about is that we're hoping to use these approximations of where plants and plant numbers are going as a guideline. But I'm not saying that this is hard and fast. We're hoping to kind of adjust this in the field a little bit. These are some of the species we'll be looking for through surfing hydrangea. And so this is going to be the direction that we're going to head in, but there may be some subtle shifts in the landscaping plan as we move along. We're planning to monitor these plants and to replace anything that doesn't successfully establish. I can't tell you the size of the species that we're going to be getting. That's another area where it really depends on what we can get. I think the last thing is that we have discussed extensively the health of the holly trees in the area, and they are resprouting, and we're hoping to continue to wait and watch and see what happens. The trees right now look, the vast majority of them are resprouting. They look pretty healthy. They look different than they used to.
Shorter.
Yes, but they are resprouting, and I don't know exactly the direction that that's going to go in. You know, I don't know how long it would take for a tree to branch out over time. But I do think because of the historic nature and the age of this stand, it's important to let it be and see where it goes. And if at all possible, retain these trees. So that is what the land bank's proposing. We would like to provide you with updates, either through monitoring plans or even every 6 months us coming in here to let you know about how things are going. And
How about September?
September would be great. Although I don't know if I'll have as much to tell you. I would like to do a little bit of planting first, and I'm not really proposing that until October. I want it to cool off a little bit, so maybe we don't have as many water issues.
Lack of water.
Yes. If you have any questions, I'm
Good luck.
answer them.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I guess just at some point updating Jeff on the success of finding plants
Mhm.
and what sizes are going to be
Right.
coming in.
Yep.
If I may, not to interrupt, that may be something too that through conditioning that once the sizing is known and is available, they should be able, they'll know that well in advance of when they want to plant it in October. That could be something that, we can condition a time frame that once those sizes are identified, that the land bank reappear in front of the commission and essentially get the commission's blessing on those size and configuration of plants, either through a minor modification process or an amendment process if it's a really significant change in the change in scope, or is more of a monitoring aspect depending upon what comes in. But I think that's all very doable and conditionable, and I think that this is a project where oversight from the commission is going to be of the utmost importance to be sure that any restoration work that is done correctly and in compliance. But I think something to that nature can be conditioned in to be able to do to get them back before something goes in. The one thing that may be interesting to do that we haven't done typically too is it may be something that, well, extra work for you guys and extra work for the land bank to some degree, that once the plants are sourced and sized, that another field viewing take place to see where the specific plants are going before they're planted in October. Maybe something that's always available as an option too. And then, not for nothing, at the end of the day, if you guys don't feel like it's going well, you still have the ability to enforce the conditions of the order or impose additional concessions through additional enforcement if needed. So you guys have a lot of options.
One just thought that I had, Rachel, after our site meeting, you mentioned first and talk about spading in some larger cedars.
Right.
However, I just don't know what your access is going to be.
I hadn't thought about that. And I don't know exactly what our access will be at this point.
Right. Is there any way to get into here that would be wide enough for a sizable truck? I mean, obviously, the damage was done already.
I don't want to, the only way to get in is that way. The other way will not allow you, you could actually spade in cedars, and this is an area that, where are we? You could put cedars back in here, where there actually have been cedars cut, and we're not sure by who or why, over time. So we could certainly spade in cedars back here, but you do have a small boardwalk here.
Right.
If we were going to bring in anything here, it would have to be dry, very dry. We would make sure that there's accommodations made crossing this wetland area, because that's the wettest area.
Right.
And then
You have to use ground mats.
yeah, and then we would get up in here, but size would be limited by what we felt like we could comfortably get in here.
Right. There's no access from this side anymore, right?
Helicopter?
Yeah. Well,
It's a possibility.
I would say to that end, Ben, too, that could be something, when we've thought about it too, where anything that would involve, we could also condition, some sort of protection, whether it's plating or something to get that access. But sometimes too, looking at those as far as, time of year restrictions and other things to help ensure that the potential is lessened. or monitored. I mean, I think this is a case where you don't want to do more damage fixing than fixing. So, to be careful.
Yeah, right, so just something to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
It could also end up being smaller trees put in and,
Yeah,
you know,
size restricted.
by
Yeah.
hand and then let them grow.
Yeah.
If that's something the commission would prefer.
I would maybe consider some nursery-grown, nice nursery-grown stock that could be brought in on, you know, a loader rather than a tree spade, just because the trees, you know, the big tree spade, not only is it
Wide or it's
wide,
Yeah, they're
very
huge,
heavy.
yeah.
they're really heavy. There's no,
It's a lot of dirt and steel.
Yeah.
you know,
So,
Yeah, I think it's important that we, as kind of mentioned, we keep track of the survivorship of these trees, and if
Yeah,
they
sure.
do pass, what they get replaced with.
right. And it also, the other thing we talked about was, you know, this new cut line is not the benchmark for
Oh, God, yeah.
height.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. These are allowed to grow.
Yeah,
well, to that end too, I think that's something you could also condition with a simple condition that says all vista pruning is prohibited and trees are to
Yeah.
grow
Naturally.
on
they love to
until-
grow naturally, yeah.
until they go away naturally. I mean, it only goes so far, but I think memorializing all those conditions in this case is going to be important, so hopefully it doesn't come up again.
And Rhoda?
Yeah, for the record, Rhoda Lyman, I'm a direct abutter. I own 280, 282, and 284 Pulpus. And my question is, the holly trees, and I'm not an expert on this at all, but they don't look very good to me at all. I walk my dogs there every single morning, and they don't look good. And I'm wondering, I've owned that property for 30 years, and those holly trees were spectacular. When the Craig family owned it, I mean, that was their pride and joy, and I'd like to see some attempt to see them back again at some point. And I'm just wondering what you're doing. I'd like to know who's doing the work.
Okay, well, the land bank would be doing it.
No, but who's actually doing the work?
The land bank property maintenance staff, Jen Pollock, Rico, Richard Schraft, probably Rob Early will be involved.
So it's not the same group that
No,
massacred the thing, okay?
well, within reason, but no.
And I'd like to continue to see the plans. I've asked Eric for them, and he's
Okay.
ignored my request, so.
Okay. I'm not, I think I defer to Ben in terms of tree expertise, but I think the trees, I'm pleased with where they're at now, actually, compared to where they were.
And I'm looking at where they've been.
Well, right,
Yeah.
right, of course.
Yeah,
And
it's
I mean,
tragic.
Right, and so there is no way to get it immediately back to where it
No, I
was.
understand that, but I would hope that there'd be a real effort to do that.
Oh, Rhoda, I noticed that at least some of the trees are starting to sprout down lower, not just at the crown, but the trunks are starting to sprout some branches too, so they may start to fill in. But my own,
Yeah, go ahead, Vernon.
my own opinion is that these trees have survived this, and I know the commission is loath to cut down established trees in every case, and I would just hate to now have to go, to even think about going in there and clearing these things out and just to put in more hollies, or to put in anything, yeah.
Well, I
I
it's
think
too
we
soon.
give these
I
trees
think
a
we need to give them
chance,
some
yeah.
time.
Give them a chance.
So I would just say, I think the best chance, Rhoda, that we have to kind of get back to what it was is to let what is grow back to the extent that it will. I don't think it's going to look the same for a lot of years,
Oh, I'm sure.
but I think in the long term, with the right kind of care in there, you could probably get it to look like something eventually. We did see some encouraging growth on them. It's going to look kind of ridiculous for a while, but
It does.
I think that eventually.
They're alive.
Yeah.
Well, if I may, and it's something that I've been doing a lot of looking into and talking to some foresters that I went to school with about, because I don't have a lot of experience directly with American holly trees, to be perfectly honest. And I think, and with a lot of timber stand management, you want to look at it from the sense of assessing the health of the trees on a regular basis, and then making smart decisions to pick out your healthier trees and pick out your trees that aren't competing correctly, and then even if it down the road is looking at some selective thinning to take out the less competitive trees to provide more resources for the more to help encourage that growth faster. I mean, I don't think that this is a project that is a 3-year evaluation of the holly trees and you walk away and you're done. I mean, this is going to be a 15, 20-year kind of look and management of a stand of trees, really more like I hate to say it this way, but more like a production stand of trees where you're going to be looking at enhancing the health of the maximum number of trees possible to get the maximum amount of growth. And that's probably going to take some stand thinning at times. It's going to take some selective pruning and some management, and it's really going to be probably a lot more intensive a management than used to be done on the trees, just to try to get the trees that are doing well to thrive and the trees that are not doing well, I hate to use the word out of the way, but out of the way to let the trees that are doing well, so hopefully, the eyesore, the blight that happened goes away faster than slower, and you get a better, healthier, more productive stand of trees than maybe what you started with. As a long-term goal, that we'll all be off the commission and all retired by the time we get to that end of that long-term
We can
goal.
hope
So
anyway.
I think that's why it's important when we think about conditioning this restoration to set up whoever's looking at this and reviewing this down the road, or if this issue comes up again, or someone tries to permit something on an adjacent lot or on the land bank lot again for any work, that people know that this is the management that's in place on those trees and this is what's going forward. So
That is true. I mean, I wish I thought this was going to be a quick fix, but I don't. I think this is going to be a long time restoration effort, and I don't know that there's a way to necessarily bring it back in a year, and I wish there was, but I don't think there is.
Well, and I would say that those trees were probably overcrowded to start with. I mean, he obviously planted that as basically a holly farm. He was harvesting branches and things to sell. So he wasn't thinking of, having holly trees that look like, when you think of a holly, it's something that's usually pretty full from the bottom all the way to the top, kind of conical shape, and, vegetation, thick vegetation the whole way, and it looked, the surviving trees don't look anything like that really. They're too close together, and
I do think it's something that obviously, if we watch what's going on and see how the things close out, I think that the real interesting test is going to be next spring when we see what successfully overwinters or not, and what's able to pack enough energy away to hopefully leaf out and branch out earlier. I mean, I know these are evergreens, but they bud out similar still. So
Also, I would really like to have the land bank hire an arborist to oversee this. I think that's really important. So pick a firm.
Just the holly aspect of it, or the
I
whole
mean,
thing?
maybe even get somebody on board, just to sort of oversee the.
we do regularly for our conditions, just as an example, require certified herbicide or pesticide applicators to be used. I think you would know better than anyone here, Ben, that there are certified arborists that are there, that having a condition that a certified arborist be brought on to oversee this project can certainly be a condition that you look for.
I mean, I think
And
to at least review it.
Yeah, review it, oversee it, offer advice. They can
Consult.
consult.
I think it would be helpful for time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be good for everybody. Can I ask Seth Wilkinson? Seth, do you have any experience with anything like this?
Sure, just two comments. I guess there definitely are restorative pruning techniques that you might consider in the coming years. Probably too early for that.
Yeah.
But what you have as a real benefit are these established root systems, and they'll be able to redevelop the tree faster than anything you ever planned or anything. So I agree with the comments that were made earlier, because you've still got that resource, and you'd be amazed at how quickly. I mean, I lost from just snow, a smaller holly at my house, and just personal experience, and I figured it snapped off 2 feet off the ground. I figured recovery from those roots. But there will come a time in the coming years, and an arborist can help with this, to direct sort of when that pruning should be done and how that should be, because you want to direct that growth so that the stability and integrity of the structure of the tree is preserved long term to try to recover that, and you'll actually expedite the recovery process in that regard. And the only other comment I sort of had in my head was with regards to if you're thinking of replanting cedars. One experience that we plant a lot of cedars as a company, and one thing we've seen loud and clear over the recent years is they're smaller trees, but the trees which are actually grown in pots as opposed to transplanted. So many of the transplanted cedars come from heavy, thick clay soils, and when they come to Nantucket sandy soils, they use so much transplant shock. Really, the best thing to probably do is remove all the soil off the tree and then plant it bare root, which is very tough on the tree. But we've actually seen, starting with smaller cedars that were actually grown in the pots, it's actually a non-soil, it's potty soil. They go through much less transplant shock, and they actually tend to grow more quickly. So if you're considering introducing cedars to complement the hollies, that might be something to consider. It's just the downside is they're not as available as a big shrub, but in 5 years you'll probably be happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the access goes, it makes sense on that level.
You can carry those in by hand. They're lighter because they don't have clay too.
So I have a question, Seth. Do holly farms use sort of beneficial fertilizers that would be compliant with our fertilizer regulations to promote added growth?
Good question. My understanding is it's probably more of the micronutrients that would help them in these types of soil conditions than sort of the traditional NPK, which usually are the more problematic conditions from a beautification standpoint. But taking a soil test and determining what might help for specific top growth would be the way to go for that. But oftentimes there are some injections and things which have very low nitrate that might be something to support the tree. There's another product which doesn't have really any nutrients in it called Bioplex, which can help the stress. I don't like it stressed. Not terribly familiar with that, but I know it's used. But there's definitely some things. Again, I think an arborist could probably assist with all those things. But there's definitely, I think there are things that you can do, which is the good news. And the fact that they're resprouting is a very, very good sign, especially when it's hot and dry.
Yeah, in the summer, yeah.
If they're managing to resprout in this kind of challenging growing conditions, I think it's a really good sign.
Thanks, Ed.
So, Rhoda, we're going to do our best. Thank you, sir.
I
Well.
don't have a DEP number.
Oh, yeah. Anything else we want out of from Rachel, or any other questions or comments, or public questions or comments? Okay.
Looks good, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So, Rachel, you want to continue for 2 weeks? Okay, unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this until the 10th.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, amended orders. Mac Daddy Trust at 68 and 72 Monomoy Road.
For the applicant, Gasparo, I just realized that I hadn't filed the full-size proposed conditions plan. You have it in your packet, and I also have it here, letter size. And then what's here in the file, which is also something which I had included in the application, is the previously approved plan. And I can take a few minutes to go over this, and then we can, if needed, of course, get you the full-size plan. I apologize. I'm not sure which page it's on in your packet, but looks like this. I wrote proposed amended plan on the top. And to start off, I'm before you tonight to request an amended order of conditions for work within the buffer zone to coastal banks, coastal dune, and then also work within land subject to coastal storm flowage. The amendment is, as I see it, for work that is very similar to what the current order of conditions permitted. We essentially have a site that has two existing single-family dwellings, and we received approval to replace those with flood-compliant structures and some landscaping and a pool. So to go over quickly what was approved, in front of you, you can see the resource areas in blue, and then in pink, the 25 and the 50-foot buffer zones. Land subject to coastal storm flowage runs the entire lower portion of the property to the bottom of the coastal bank. And so the property was sold, and I'm working for the new owners who have refined their architectural plans, but they are essentially quite similar to what was previously approved. One change that I would note in terms of layout is that there was an approved driveway that came in like this to this portion of the structure, and they now propose that this driveway would come in like this underneath this structure. Again, as was previously approved, you had a couple of structures and a swimming pool and some steps up here. This is the one you may remember from old site visits. It's got an big asphalt driveway with the big loop at the bottom, which and again, in terms of this was included with the application, but where we are at the very end of Monomoy Road, one of the last properties. And so we've included the architectural plans with the request for the amended order, alterations essentially to the general configuration of the main house. You can see that it was shaped like this before, and now it's shaped like that. Again, the main portion of the house remains outside of the 50-foot setback. There is like a patio raised element that is still in that area, but that is less than what currently exists. We're moving back away from the dune area, and we're also not any closer than what was previously approved. And then we have a proposed structure right here, which is essentially a 414 square foot structure was approved there, and that's proposed here. That would be a garage with a second story studio, and again, the foundation for this structure would meet construction in the flood zone in terms of flood vents, and then this structure, like we said, would be a garage, and then any mechanicals in the living area would be elevated above that. So that's really the scope of the proposed request. And like I say, I apologize that I didn't submit that as a full-size plan, and I could be happy to get that for you along with any additional information that may arise that you may need.
Any questions for Art?
Well, it's sort of, the pool is within the 25 and 50-foot setback, isn't it, on the sort of this odd topography?
That's correct. It's outside of the 25, but it's within the 50.
Right.
And again, there's an existing house in that location.
Right.
So we would be getting rid, the pool is within, the dashed line on the plan is the existing house. So the pool is completely within what's already a structure. And we'd be relocating that house or it'd be removed from the site.
Right, okay, so the pool was where the house was.
Yep,
The new house is all outside the 50, right?
that's correct.
And then,
I would, if I may,
Yep.
just for clarity, on the upper lot, yes, and on the lower lot, the main portion of the house is outside of the 50, though there are some steps in this portion of sort of elevated deck patio area is, but it's within sort of, there's another house down there too. So there's a slight area that's inside of the 50
Okay, so,
there,
okay,
right?
so the dash line there, yeah.
But
And I-
The
the two
new
structures,
garage is within,
The new
50
garage
as well.
is not within the 50.
but the two structures flanking the pool is one basement.
The new garage is
Am I
between
looking
the
at-
250s, sorry.
Hold on a second, let me just take one question at a time.
Fire dimension.
I'm sorry, I'm going to start with Mr. Topham. The one
The
one
two-
basement that connects the two structures, that's correct. And then,
So that's
So right here.
a lot of,
but it's outside of the 50.
Something.
no, I get that, but
Yep. And then
the whole thing.
there was a question about,
What was that? We got like 4 conversations coming up.
Yeah, come on, guys,
We
let's
just
hold down.
bring it to one, it's confusing enough.
Can we start with Joe?
Yeah, I just was concerned that there's so much construction on top of that bank. I mean, you've got the house on one side of the garage, and then on the opposite side of the pool is a outer building, but the entire footprint of both structures in the patio is all one, right? So
That's
from the
correct.
pool all the way to the street is gonna be excavated.
that's correct.
Okay. Seems-
It just will get right to you. Anything else from the commission here?
I guess I'm still confused about the garage and the 50-foot setback on, because this is the new plan.
Yes, this is a new plan. It's the
So
same
is
one as
this-
here.
Is this just steps to the garage or something?
The steps are back here, that's just stepping stones.
Okay.
Art, where's the previously approved? I know
This
we're-
is this one.
is the previously approved.
This is,
Okay,
this is
so-
the current plan, so this is the, and then we're seeking an amendment to modify this.
So we already. So we did this, but there was no pool, right?
The pool is back up
back
here.
here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The pool is
Okay.
back up here.
Okay, I'm looking at upside down. Okay, so we did this. There was a pool. So what's? Okay, so
This is new.
yeah. Okay, so I'm just trying to get my head
Yeah,
around
yeah.
Yeah,
what are the big changes?
Summary of change.
Sure, and like I say, I think, I do apologize for not having that other plan, and maybe we'll hear all the concerns, and then I continue, and I don't want to take too much time, but I would also like to hear what concerns that there are, in other words, I can put together. But there's really just that very little change there, right? And then now this connects, and then the shape of this structure is what has changed.
Change to a T.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, it's really, as we see it, just footprint modifications.
Right.
They
Just a different-
they actually designed, when I did the permitting for this, there wasn't necessarily full scale design, and then the new owner has developed, refined plans, and that's what we're here with.
Yeah. Okay. So different shape, basically.
Yeah.
Same
Uses,
same
exactly.
pool.
The
Still.
footprints are all out of the 50s.
That's right.
All right. Okay. And how about this one? It's just, I'm just trying to,
Same, so here you can see this shape, and then you can see this shape at the same time.
yeah.
So it was shaped, and I think maybe if I did an overlay with a red line type thing that's what I had meant to do, and sorry.
Would have been easy.
Is there an
Yep.
upgraded landscaping plan with this?
I don't have a complete landscape plan. Well, I have the new driveway. But I can obviously get that. We should have that.
Look at this.
It's hard to
Well,
address
well,
all the concerns
so I don't want to take too
without
much time of
being able to
the
review
commission,
it.
and I'll put it together a clearer plan that might, and then if I know what the abutters' concerns are, I might be
Let's
able
find those
to
out right
try to
now.
work with some of those as well and come back in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Art.
And Sarah Alger, I represent the people immediately to the west, the Aggle Hearts at 74. And as I told Art when I called him yesterday, I guess our concerns are twofold. The first thing is, well, my clients were asleep at the switch when this first application came before you, so I apologize for not having been here for the original order. Now that they're here with an amendment, the two concerns we have are, number one, that we don't think the plan that you have on the amendment is sufficient to make a determination. This plan has your net benefit analysis, what's within the 0 to 25 proposed and existing, what's 25 to 50 existing proposed. Now you just have an architect's plan with no offsets and no calculation, so it's really hard to evaluate what the impact is. Even if you had the full size plan, I mean, it's just apples and oranges and really hard to compare. The second thing is, and this is probably more substantive, and this is really just a question that we've asked. When the Eagleharts were here in 2001 for their house, we had a similar plan done also by Blackwell and Associates that showed, let's see, so over here, top limit of coastal bank that comes along the edge here. Then there was a prior submission for this particular property at 72, which also showed the top of coastal bank coming down and going along the edge. And we're wondering why this isn't, because the regulations we understand have changed since 2001, but I don't think they've been more lenient or more relaxed. Why aren't they being held to the same line that we were held on our property, and why isn't that impacting the edge of their dwelling and also the location of this newly proposed garage?
And what are you saying that you're?
So this is my.
This is your client.
No, this is my client here. Okay, this is my client here. And this is the house next door.
Yeah.
Am I doing this upside down?
Actually,
It's the other way. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. So this is the house next door.
Yeah.
And here is the limit of coastal bank here.
And you're saying it was very close.
And, well, it's very close to
Now, where
the,
would it be on this plan?
Here,
right. And then here is this property. Let me try to get it facing the exact same way, like that.
yeah.
Right, where it's showing top of coastal bank coming down right along here, which is where the garage is going and also where this house is. And we're just trying to understand why there isn't a buffer zone that's coming in from the east as well as from the north and the south.
Got you.
So why the top of the bank
Yeah.
isn't represented, only the bottom?
Right.
We can look at that, and next time we'll get you a revised plan.
Okay.
We get better pictures on this one, the driveway and access.
This is the other plan.
That-
Sarah,
that's-
you've got to leave those with Jeff since you
Yes.
Yeah,
didn't
no, you
present
can
them.
have them.
Nope. That's the rule. It hits the table, it becomes mine.
Or you show it to us, it's Jeff's.
Unless it's like a bill or money that you owe, then
It'd be great if you'd see this.
This is this structure. So this isn't this one, this is this one.
Right, I'm trying to look at this one. This is where that whole foundation, right?
That's this one.
Right, so there's
This is
egress down
confusing.
here, there's egress up here, and then the pool's up here.
Yes,
The driveway.
That's right.
It'd be great to kind of,
You want a cross section?
cross section
Or an elevation?
Yeah, put everything together.
We probably should have at least that elevation.
Yeah, they're in HTC right now, so
Yeah,
I can certainly include that. Again, that's sort of what we'd like to hear is whatever everybody would like to see, and we'll continue for 2 weeks and we'll compile the information.
Did you have something, Steve?
No,
Okay.
I'm with the applicant.
Those are mine, and
I
I'm
was
leaving
gonna,
them.
I was gonna They hit the table there, Ted.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can't have my glasses, though. Okay.
Property and bills.
If there's nothing else, commission or public, you wanted to continue for 2 weeks, Art?
Yes, please.
We'll continue this for 2 weeks, if there's no objections from the commission. Okay, we'll continue this for 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we go to the public meeting, certificates of compliance.
That's coastal bank from
All right, real quickly, Mr. Chairman, I'm just gonna save us some pain and suffering on a couple of these really quickly.
and east. Even?
Um,
Is there another one?
For Saratoga, we're still waiting for some information back on that. That was the one, they had a fence that they needed to remove that was installed that put the certificate of compliance was filed for. Someone installed the fence after they filed for the certificate. The fence needs to come out before they're in compliance. So they are in the process of removing the fence. So I'm asking for that one to be held to the 10th at a minimum, to the 10th for them to finish that work. And then number 2, Thompson at 14 Fargo Way, when they submitted for their certificate of compliance, my original review of their materials, I found to be substantially lacking in information that demonstrated compliance. So I sent them a laundry list of about 8 or 9 things that they needed to be able to provide before my comment was I would put it in front of the commission. So I'm also asking that that would get continued. For those who don't remember, the major issues of compliance there were that I had asked for. They didn't provide any sand delivery information, and they had a very specific blend of sand that they were supposed to be putting back. So my comment was, until that is verified and provided, that number 1 makes it impossible to issue certificates of compliance for. The plantings are not complete, which makes it impossible to issue a certificate of compliance for. And there are a couple other, I won't say nitpickier things, but those are kind of the big ticket items. So they were missing a lot. So they're also due for their next annual report coming in. So I told them just to compile it all together. So that's where that one sits. Other than that, we can go through the rest of them as they're listed.
Okay.
So, question about the 14 Fire Road. They're
Yes.
still not in compliance from the enforcement order on them?
Their compliance for the removal of the things, the thing I'm asking for demonstration of compliance on is the sand mixture that was required. That was the one that had the 40-40-20 blend of
Yeah, weird.
sand, silt, and aggregate that was going in. I mean, I could go out there and pull samples and do an analysis myself, but it's their burden to demonstrate that they are in compliance with that. And until they can demonstrate their, I don't want to waste anyone's time discussing it as far as certificate of compliance, and if they don't generate it pretty quickly, since it's already in, that would leave them subject to enforcement again, which I have to update for something else related to enforcement that's I'm more interested in later, so.
Okay.
So, in my opinion, they are not in total compliance right now. So,
Okay, so we'll wait on those 2 then. So, then we go to Cross at 9 Wollman Road.
all right, cross at 9 Wollman. This was for the renovation and an addition on an existing dwelling, 9 Wollman Road. It was constructed in compliance with what was permitted, and I would recommend that that certificate could get issued. There's no ongoing conditions for that.
Do I have a motion to issue this?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay. 48 Shimo Pond Road LLC.
All right, so this is one that's a little different. If you guys remember, this is the coastal project that Sutton, I'll pause if I pronounce it correctly, and Verigen did.
VH.
What's that?
VH will be good.
VH did. instead of me doing the search for this one, I asked them to come and kind of give you guys an update, and they submitted their first monitoring report with us as well. And they are understanding that the monitoring and things, obviously, are gonna have to continue for the project. But they just like to get it kind of buttoned up, but I thought this would be better heard from the horse's mouth than from me, so.
Certainly. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, Member of the Commission, we did the project and set with his crew, built it as it was designed and per the order of condition.
Could you introduce yourself again, please?
Yes. My name is Varush Hagopian from GEI, and I got Seth Wilkinson from Wilkinson Associates. I was the design engineer and the permitting. Seth participated, and of course, Seth's firm is one built project. We monitored it, the process. I did bring with me a little vignette. If you can kind of flip through it, you can see the site, what it was during construction, and how it already, before it was prepared for, this is when the site was in its raw condition. You can see two images, one from one direction and the other one from the other. This is when we started the construction. You can see how the fiber rolls begin to put, and then we have the core biomat. It's being rolled and then staked into the ground. And then this image is when we finished the fiber rolls, and we are on the upper portion of the slope. We are putting the, again, biomats, erosion control, before we started planting. And then this is an image when it was complete and it was ready to planting to start. Planting starts along the top. And this is, as you can see, the plant. We really set up irrigation system, and within very challenging year, we managed to grow a very healthy, as you can see, there's our irrigation heads, very healthy community over there. We are really proud of it, the way it came together. It came spark well. It meets our expectation. I hope it meets yours. The client's very happy, and we will continue to monitor it, of course, as to comply with the order of conditions. And we did submit our first report, annual report, and the next one will be in the spring. Seth did some nourishment for the Senate. Seth planned, how much did we add for this last effort?
I believe it was about 60 cubic yards, exactly what was estimated. The idea was we placed the sand, as you can see, over the fiber rolls in the front, so that we would preserve the function to serve as a sediment source to the adjacent coastal resources. And we didn't have a particularly harsh winter from a weather standpoint. And the lunar tides and the moderate storms did displace the sand. We didn't see severe fluctuation of the beach elevation. The little patches of Spartina patens and salt meadow hay, which are scattered along the beach area, were looking great. They didn't get buried by the sand or anything like that. They were protected during construction with picket fencing, snow fencing, and then removed since construction was done. And that seems to be continuing to thrive. So I think that the nourishment budget is good. We only have 1 year, but I would anticipate that most springs that moderate amount of sediment would be reapplied, and that's a good thing.
We will monitor it twice a year, and of course, every after significant storm. And if we see any change or alteration, we will report and contact CONCOM and provide if there is mitigation needs to be done, we'll provide the solution and seek permission to.
That's really impressive. It looks terrific.
It looks
fantastic.
We should go out there and look at it sometime.
Vegetation, how quickly it's come in. If you look closely, actually, I have a couple of images we should show. It was actually, they were taken earlier, the vegetated images were just taken a couple weeks back by Verusian, and get a little bit of a close-up for copies. It's the same picture front and back. I don't know how to use a copy machine right now. Picture. If you look closely, again, this was taken, I believe, in early June, but these are the pre-vegetated fiber rolls, and the grasses are coming up through. So that's exactly what's supposed to happen, and just go close up so you can see that a little bit better.
If it was a little wetter here, you can see that further coming up. And, but we have to put a lot of water in it really to get the vegetation to grow this fast.
And that's temporary, obviously. You can see all the lines around the surface, so as soon as it's established, it can get cut and remove it completely from the site. It's just for establishment to get those roots down as quickly as possible. So when that intense storm hits, we want as many roots in the bank growing in the bank.
What do you do on more remote sites, just on a, from a water standpoint, just hope for the best?
I have a site like that, and it got planted not as early as we would have liked in the spring, but it was north facing and it was much higher clay concentrations. I think if it had been a sandier bank, there was actually more. We got into this bank, there were more fines and silts than we were expecting, which is also partly to do with the good regrowth. But we've had a very high survival rate on that particular project, but it's a north-facing bank, which makes a huge difference.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it's an island, so it doesn't have a source of water other than what you pump. So it was just not enough. So we just crossed our fingers and hoped the clay and the low moisture content. We did a project for Town of Oak Bluffs, a vineyard, about a year ago. Same thing, it was north-facing bank. I really try not to do them on south-facing banks with considerable size plants. These are 2 or 3 gallon shrubs that were planted. Those on a south-facing bank with irrigation, you can use every single shrub.
Sure.
But north-facing, you're better. It definitely helps. It definitely jump starts the plants.
So, could I ask how much it cost roughly?
According to the owner, it wasn't cheap. It was substantial. The whole project, I think, the design and the construction ran somewhere around 2 figures, a little over 2. Yeah. I mean, we really wanted to do it right. We didn't want to cut corners, and that's how we do things. We want to do it right the first time. We want to establish it. We came in front of you, it was a new design. You were a little skeptical. We wanted to prove that, we were standing behind our design and our work. And of course, I think we got there. I like really to see this site becomes a good example. I even like to see some in the future, the lower section of that sand nourishment area that the grasses will come through.
Yeah.
And it'll hold it together. We're still going to do the nourishment as part of the sediment budget. And if that grass gets established, we can put the sand right at the toe at the same amount that we need to provide, so it still becomes part of the littoral process.
I know we don't have anything on this property, so we can't go trespass necessarily, but it would be nice to go do a site visit and
There
see
is
it.
access, actually. It's a right-of-way from both sides. Because the neighbor on the northeast side.
I was going to say, you do actually have an open order on 10 North Road, which has been constructed and adjacent to this. And
I would also say that you could access from any public access and traverse the beach below the high water mark. You will always have access that way.
And I think that the owner, frankly, recently a recent approval that came before this board a little further to the east. The neighbors were interested in seeing. They, through me, asked if it would be all right. Actually arranged a site visit. He came out, met them, and talked to them about his experience. And so I think he's not going to be the type of person who's just going to have to come back from your property. So it would be possible. But you do have an open order where you could go right to the property line and see it very, very well.
We might think about that then, just go out there and look at this.
Certainly. I mean, I'll say in my site visits, I was very astounded to see how well it had been put together and what it looks like. It's interesting to see. I'll be the first to say I'm not sure that this is the most appropriate structure for all environments, but it certainly at this site looks in keeping with the site from our inspections. And I know I checked out construction while it was going on a number of times when we were out there, and it was a really well done project.
We should go,
Yeah.
if we get a chance,
Yeah.
some Monday, go out there.
Sure, we can put it on the schedule for.
Yeah, I'm interested to
That's okay.
see how it holds up in a storm. Because I guess I had pictured more vegetation on the lower slope and to
We
have
have-
it be all loose sand.
We have the seeds and we have the cores are impregnated with stuff, but it's been so dry. And I think they are a little bit in the dormant season, and next year hopefully in spring we get some more moisture, they should really come.
We typically do see this sort of, as long as everything stays stable, this sort of seaward migration down from the upper portions as the plants are competing with each other. That's the idea, is it comes with.
Well, should we issue the certificate on this? Jeff, is that your opinion, or?
I do, but I have a lot of ongoing conditions for this one, and it's something that they know it's coming, but it's most of the, I can hit you with the numbers because I have them kind of out of order, but it would be 17, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 26, 29, 30, and 31. And just to run through those in real quick summary, 17 is the survey plans twice a year, and then after storm events, and then there's some requirements for what's on the plan. 18 is the photo monitoring. 19, I didn't continue. 20 is just the applicant is responsible for achieving all of the materials stored, dislodged, or washed off the site for the life of the project, so that would kind of continue anyways, but it's nice to memorialize. 21 is should the monitoring report show an adverse impact to surrounding properties? The applicant essentially has to come back to determine what action needs to be taken. 22 is the biannual reporting post-removal of the structure should it fail. Hopefully that doesn't come up. 23 is the nourishment requirement that it's maintained to the volume specified in the plan of records with the sand compatibility component, and then the as-built that goes with some of that. 26 is the pedestrian access across the public beach shall be maintained. 29 is kind of covered by this, but there's also an initial monitoring report to be presented to the commission 1 year after it's been installed. So next year they'll be back in front of you again to go over what it looks like then and how it's going. That one would go forward. 30 it's just the core logs shall be kept in good repair, and if they are damaged, they shall be repaired and notice provided to the commission of the repair. So if you need to fix it, they have to let us know. And then 31 is kind of the one that's unique to this style of project, is the planting requirement and the percentage, the 75% requirement for the living plants on it. So all of those kind of wrap to the monitoring reports, but I wanted to memorialize that as ongoing. So when the cert gets recorded, all the parties involved know that they're still obligated to continue with this. And I think, with a lot of these projects, it behooves them to do the monitoring, because then they know if you're a homeowner, you're spending your money correctly and you know what you're getting. And if you're trying to evaluate the project, you're getting the information you need to evaluate the project. So it's kind of a snake eating its tail to some degree, but I think it's important, but I wanted to at least get it on the certificate that was the case.
Okay, so do I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for 48 Shimmer Pond Road with ongoing conditions 17, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 26, 29, 30, and 31? Yeah. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Good job.
It's a long trip for a cert, so.
We are interested to make it done properly.
That's very interesting indeed.
You know what I learned from that, sir? Is I need to group my conditions together. So I can spit them out like that. I can say 20 to 29.
Okay, so then that takes us to Barberry at 4 Gosnold Road. This is a reissue.
Yes, this is a reissue. They just lost the original to be recorded. The site is still in compliance, and we recommend that we could reissue the certificate.
Motion to reissue. Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, Todd, 11 Wollman Road.
11 Wollman Road. I need to get this one out like this. It's later. So this was the project, you guys remember, was for the driveway relocation on the curve in the Wollman Road. That was done. This was the one that we had a lot of discussion about. The existing cherry trees that were
Splitting to wetlands, right?
Yep, and there was a wetland that was splitting. So, on our field inspection and what was done in the monitoring report that, again, is listed later in the agenda that was filed for the first one, what was done, and then one of the adjustments that was made in the field at the time, after some discussion with our office, when they laid out the driveway specifically, a couple of the cherry trees were right on the edge of the layout of the driveway. And the contractor, Ken Panicek, contacted us, and Brian contacted us about just saying, all right, it's a foot. Do you guys have an issue if we just go around the tree instead of taking it down and replanting? And I just said, please leave the original trees there, because they're original. They're the what you'd be looking to replace. So if it involved means the driveway is going to bend a little bit in one spot that it wasn't shown exactly, I would still consider that to be substantial compliance. The only other thing that, as they were doing the construction, and it was looked at, the driveway that was existing before was in a bit of a berm area that was there, and they had marked it on the plans. And when they opened it up and confirmed that the area of that berm was a little different size than what they had thought, but that has been revegetated and is in compliance as well. I didn't have, and I wanted to get the number correctly off the back of this. I did want to continue a couple conditions with this one as well. What was done, I wanted to continue, I was going to recommend the issuance of the certificate with ongoing condition 19, and that's for the monitoring report with photographs, beginning and end of each grade season for 3 years. So this was the initial one that came in this time. And then I wanted to continue number 21, that any invasive species found to be entering the project area shall be removed. So that way, I know there's some invasive species in the wildland area that have some bittersweet or phragmites or knotweed or porcelain berry, something creep into the site that shows up, that they have to remove it so it doesn't get a foothold. So those are the two that I would recommend to go forward, but other than that,
Yeah, I'd love some better photos of the restoration area too, if possible.
Did you see the monitoring ones too, or?
No, I just see the ones with the certificate of compliance.
so
Okay, yeah, there's a little bit more.
Okay.
So I would say if you look into the monitoring report, it goes into much more detail.
Okay.
The certificate of compliance is focused more around the driveway construction. The monitoring is more focused more towards the restoration areas.
Okay, so I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for Todd with ongoing conditions 19 and 21.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
I drove by that a lot. I had a job going on. It looks good.
Yeah.
Ken did a nice job with it.
Yeah, I gotta say, the thing I appreciated was when they got to the cherry trees after they had laid it out,
Yeah.
is he kind of made the field determination that he could get around it without impacting the driveway. And instead of taking it out and moving it, he just said, let's just
Yeah.
make a little wiggle to get around it.
Yeah.
No one notices, doesn't impact anyone, but they didn't have to cut down the trees.
Saves those trees, which was a big concern of the commission, so.
That was good. It's a good example of a contractor looking at something and saying, this seems better
Yeah.
than what we had planned, so.
Yeah, I think he's really
Yeah, Ken is good.
good.
Okay, Stamus at 10 Crow's Nest Way.
Same as 10 Crow's Nest Way. This was another renovation and an addition on an existing structure. It's one of the crow's nest cottages that was there. It's another project that was constructed in compliance and has been completed, and there are no ongoing conditions for this one as well. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue for Stamus?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, Mayor, 20 Gingy Lane.
All right, Gingy Lane. So,
That's street name.
this was a project that was for the construction of a single-family home with landscaping and an accessory structure in a driveway. It's landscaped. Again, it's a local filing only, and it's in compliance with the local order. There were no conditions as part of the project, so it's in compliance for what was permit.
Okay, then,
Conditions to choose from to even have one going.
do I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for mayor?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, orders of conditions. Do we have anything that closed tonight?
Well, the only one that we have, the new draft and order for Holt from the last time. We can take a look at. We obviously don't have to issue it tonight. But just to get started. So this is the one that we had the phantom level. And to Emily's question earlier, I wish I knew a solution to guarantee that we will never miss any of these.
That's 98.
Yeah.
Two people. Yeah, it is. It's just one that's, I really wish there was a way to do it, but two separate people missed the same spot at the same time, that two people that normally do a very good job at doing it. I wish I had a better answer. I never like when things get missed, but it did. So.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about it. And what's done is done in this case, I guess.
I'll be the first to admit, sometimes when more time goes out to projects, I'll go out with our regular field viewings, but I don't always inspect all of the wetland lines to the same degree that they do. The ones that they don't go to, take a look at. But I'm not saying that had I gone in 2012, I would have caught that either. So.
It would be kind of a burden to have somebody have to go out and check for multiple seasons before you could set a line down to see what it looks like in the spring, and then
Yeah, I don't.
you know.
Is it though? I just think it's like, if people have open projects, we should be looking at these things. With all the development we have, and the changes in wetlands in certain areas, you almost do need to look seasonally. You know, you couldn't tell if there were rare perennials, forbs, things like that growing unless you looked at the right time of year. And I think we miss a lot of that stuff
I'm sure that's
too.
what happened here.
Yeah.
Both guys here at the wrong time.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, again, I wish he was still here to say it, but Brian noticed it because he saw some, when he and I talked about it, he saw some what looked like water-stained leaves and went and took a look. Or if he wouldn't have seen it, I mean, by his words, he was getting into his car to leave. So, I mean, he almost went right past it too. So, and I don't want to say it's unique to Squam, but Squam is definitely the hardest area on the island to delineate vegetated wetlands. It just is. I don't know why, but the vegetation's crazy. The soil was horrible, garbage. The only other spot that I've seen on the island personally that's even more anyone close is some of the Millbrook area stuff. Can get kind of tricky. But
Millbrook's
Squam is definitely Squam can definitely be the worst. So, that being said, this project was for a pool, and a pool fence outside of 50. And there was some plantings that were there, so on the order, I just had our standard pool condition, and then that, the area that they were planting, native plantings, that no cultivars were allowed, for what it's worth.
Okay. Sounds kind of standard. Okay, if there's no questions or comments, do I have a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
And then the only other one, Mr. Chairman, that we can really kind of go over. This last one kind of came into us late, this Swains Point Trust for 260 Pulpus Road. They were doing some title research on this, and they came into the office, and they found an order of conditions that wasn't recorded, this SE 48-1652, that they would like to put on record so they could close out to finish off the file. But no one had the original order of conditions to put it on record. But it exists, so they're asking that it get reissued. It's expired, so they can't do any work or anything under it. Get reissued to put on record, and then they can come back at a subsequent meeting and put in for certificate of compliance for that project, but they need to put it on record first.
Okay. Do I have a motion to reissue for 260 Pulpus Road?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, extensions for orders of conditions. Blue Shutters Realty Trust at 4 Holbert Ave.
This is the property that's right on the parcel here.
Thanks for the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. This is the property right on Halbert Ave, which is on the turnaround. We're actually preparing to close out the permits. This one had some plantings associated with it, and I was just concerned that the order was coming due in the next, I think, week or 2 weeks, and that if anything came up with the final review and check, that the order would have lapsed before I was able to get the certificate of compliance done. So I'm asking for a 1-year extension, but we'll be following it right up with a certificate of compliance request. And that's that one, Blue Shutters, 4 Halbert.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue a 1-year extension for Blue Shutters at 4 Holbert Ave? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, now we got 2 for Hither Creek Boatyard at 20 North Cambridge Street.
Okay, I'll take the first one, SC 482141 first. Again, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors representing the applicant, Hither Creek Boatyard. Basically, it's Madigan Marine. Madigan Marine, basically, we spent a lot of time and effort on both the in-water and upland orders of conditions, and we're asking for an extension of those. The majority of the work under those orders has been completed. However, we are looking at doing some additional work out there, and we felt it would be better to do it as an amendment to the orders that we already have in place. So I'm asking to extend. Am I asking for 1 or 2 years on those, Jeff?
I want to say you were asking for 1 year.
Okay, so it's just more so to, again, protect, rather than to start over on any future work that we're doing on the boatyard, we're asking for an extension to the permit.
Oh, excuse me, it is, sorry. It wasn't.
It was a 2-year, and that would close out those. That would be the limit of what we could do on those.
Would these be the washdown buildings?
One of them, yes, one of these is the upland component, and it has to do with the washdown. Yeah, so, oh, that's right, it does have to do, it's the upland, one of them is the upland. I don't know.
Which one is that one?
2141, is that the,
Yeah.
just make sure.
I'm going to recuse myself as well.
Okay, Joe.
Okay, let me just make sure you guys refuse.
2141 is the water side wall.
Okay, so well, either way, they may have to, it's a client of theirs, so. I think both of those. So that's what we're requesting. Just we want to keep the permits as long as we can, and then come back with any additional work under those permits.
So you want 2 years for both of them?
Correct.
That does
Then that ends it.
Barring governor action again,
Yeah.
that finishes these off.
Okay, so do I have a motion to grant 2 one-year extensions for Hither Creek Boatyard for both 2141 and 2109 with Joe and Dave recusing?
1 year each or two?
2
Two
one-year
one-year extensions.
2 1-year extensions. 2 1-year extensions.
for both.
So moved.
I just make that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries with Commissioners Joe and Dave recused. Okay, that takes us down to monitoring reports. For Water's Edge at 16 Medawi Creek Road.
So again, I just been putting them on as they come in, so people can get credit for them coming in, because they're trickling in after our letters. And then Todd obviously came in as part of the certificate of compliance. So we just put them on there. So unless you guys have specific questions or unless Art wants to say something, it's kind of, or you guys can always make comments later too, or if you guys have more time to go through it and come back and ask a question, you can always get the applicant.
I know Brian left, but I still want to see extra pictures of the restoration area.
Sure, I'll let him know. I'm sure he'll send them in. You might have them already. Or feel free, I mean, you can always
Yeah, go
go
out
take
there.
a look too. So,
Okay, so we can just move on then to other business, huh? So we have the minutes from July 13th. If there's no comments, we can approve them by unanimous consent. Okay, they're approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Okay, enforcement actions, Jeff.
all right, so I was hoping to have a bunch of them in this evening. I'll start with 36 Pocono. I haven't received any correspondence from 36 Pocono at all, other than their green card back in the mail that they received their enforcement action. So I asked George Pucci to put together what our ticketing procedure needs to be, because it's not very clear in our bylaw what it is. And I'll send this around as well, but I had some follow-up questions for him. Our ticketing procedure is pretty cumbersome. We're really doing it under Mass General Law, Chapter 40. And by his Mass General Law, Chapter 40 requires that a non-criminal ticket for an offense of this nature or offense through this board has a specific penalty. And the way our bylaw is written, there is a up to. There's no specific penalty listed. So we default to the town code, which authorizes us to issue a specific penalty of a pretty awesome amount of $50 per violation. So in the meantime, he and I have sent a few drafts back and forth of how we could change and improve the bylaw to make that more like the Board of Health, where you have specific penalties. So, failure to respond to an enforcement action would be $300. So you list it off and you just don't Mickey Mouse around with this up to, as you set the penalty, and the board ends up, you guys would end up having to endorse it, and then hopefully it gets included in the bylaw where you would have specific penalties. So that was his interpretation. And the other thing that we have never done is Mass General Law, Chapter 40, also requires a board to designate an enforcing person in place of the police. So by commission vote, you can designate someone to do it. His recommendation was either to have it be the conservation agent for the town or the chairman of the commission to be that person. So
I stepped down at the right time. Shoot, thank goodness.
Let me get a car with
The other person, the conservation agent for the town, I am technically the conservation agent for the town. You guys by vote would have to designate me as the enforcing person if you didn't want it to be Andy. and then I'll explain what we have to do it, is after we designate that enforcing person, is I then have to produce a ticket in triplicate to send off that orders the person to appear before the Nantucket District Court Clerk within 21 days. And if they don't appear within that time, they are obligated to pay that penalty. I can continue to fine them on a daily basis. They fail to do that, but then we also, if they have failed to pay, you've demonstrated that you've done it correctly, can go after them in a criminal proceeding instead of a non-criminal proceeding to go forward. So it's something that the town has been starting to do with other boards. Our ticketing procedures has never been very clear until now, and it sounds like it can be some work to do, but that's what we would have to do. So I guess what I'm looking for 36 Pocomo, since they have not responded at all, is to designate someone as the enforcing person for the commission, and then whoever is designated the enforcing position is granted the permission from the board to issue the non-criminal ticket to 36 Pocomo Road.
And other offenders.
And other offenders going forward. But this one, the specific permission this time would be for 36 Pocomo Road.
Okay, so we need a couple of motions then, huh?
Well, could it be for persons, say, and he goes to violent camp?
What's that?
Say he goes to violent camp and he's gone for a month. That's what I'm saying. Is
he has a deputy.
Is there a deputy or something? Or is it an
You just have
No, but
Jeff do it.
he goes on vacation?
I think it should be Jeff.
You're right, I do too, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
So we have a motion to appoint the town.
No. So what I would ultimately like to do is go back to town meeting and fix our bylaw to create a way to put together specific fines, probably through the regulations, that reference back and forth. So you would essentially be setting up a scale of punitive penalties. Be similar to like the shellfish regulations are a pretty good example where there's specific penalties for specific violations. So you can have something as simple as failure to provide monitoring reports instead of doing it as an enforcement. Is you could just issue out a warning like we did this year where we sent a mailing to everyone and said you are behind on monitoring reports, some penalty, and you say you don't file your monitoring report, it costs you $50. That's the penalty. If you get an enforcement action and you fail to respond to your enforcement action, it's $300. You set the penalty, and I will say $300 is an important number because anything above $300 becomes a criminal matter, and you guys don't have the authority to even designate someone to issue out criminal violations. The police are the ones that issue out criminal things, so that's why going through the non-criminal process, if someone fails to complete that action, it then goes to criminal, and the town's policy is I then turn the case over to essentially to Jerry Adams.
Is it
Jerry Adams.
300 per violation? In other words, can you stack up a whole bunch?
You can. So you can be $300 per violation. Some of them can run $300 per violation per day. The Board of Health Code is a pretty good example that if you don't bring your septic system into compliance, they can hit you with daily fines.
You're
and
right.
They can stack up.
I mean, that would get somebody's attention pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, they can go, and I'll even say even being able to do $50 a day can
Yeah.
stack up pretty fast if you're diligent about ticketing. Most people will figure it out after the first couple, at least in our experience. But we need to first designate a person that can do it, and then I'll put it this way: I'm not going to just willy-nilly issue tickets without permission from you guys to do it. But then at least administratively, it's not a burden on the chair to do. And we can just do it from the staff level and send those out and keep that going, because it's essentially the first one is a 21-day clock to, you get your enforcement action time from us, you have a time to respond, you fail to respond, you get another 21 days to pay your fine and hopefully respond to your enforcement action because you're still obligated to. And then after that, you can just ticket daily and say, here you go, here you go, and just send them in. And then you can also still go after criminal. You can essentially file the criminal charge that they're contempt and force them into court to then face whatever penalty the court imposes or pay their fine. So I think in a case like this, I can't imagine someone wanting to actually, stand up in court over a violation notice from the county.
Attorney's gonna make, yeah,
So that's kind of where we are.
So, where we start is we need a motion to nominate the town conservation agent, or to appoint the town conservation agent as our ticketing officer, designating the town conservation agent as our ticketing.
Motion to designate town conservation agent as our designated ticket.
Enforcing person.
Ticket.
Second.
I will second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Congratulations, Jeff. That carries unanimously.
Book 'em, Jeff.
I know, I want to get
Book
a
'em,
ticket
Jeff.
book.
We need to get them.
The sick thing is
You've
so,
been ready for this.
so we use the same ticket book in the town. I actually had better ability to write tickets on behalf of the Board of Health than the Conservation Commission because I'm an agent of the Board of Health for fertilizer, and I can write tickets from them, but they're the same tickets. So it's just one of those shenanigans.
Now, do we need to approve a motion to go to town meeting to change the,
No, I would want to put a draft of what that language would be.
Oh, okay.
Up front, and I think that's something that it's to shoot for April town meeting to get that in and adjust that to have that language make sense. To me, it would make more sense to point it to the commission can establish a table of enforcements through the regulations. I'd have to, that's a butchery of what the language would say, but essentially it's the purpose. It would run the same way as Board of Health does it. Shellfish run regulations run the same way, but the bylaw allows the Board of Selectmen to set the penalties. Our bylaw would say that the Conservation Commission would have the ability in the regulations to set penalties for certain things. I'm not saying that you always would choose to, but if it was a real issue, I would do it. And it's not like it's big money for coming into our coffers or anything, or money maker, but it's just more of you have to be compliant. If you're not now, you're going to get a ticket.
Give you some teeth, right?
So, well, the nice thing about the tickets, and I'll be honest, the $50 doesn't really make a difference, but you go on the list of unpaid tickets. If you try to start pulling other permits or doing other things, that kind of grinds to a halt. So that's where people start to notice more when they go to get their building permit, and they get the list of unpaid tickets, and they go, it's going to have to wait. Tickets get paid real fast. So that's kind of the nice thing. And we're trying to track that all through the police now, so it's getting quicker. Baby steps. But
are there any other enforcement action tonight?
the only other thing is we did officially get sued over to North Beach Street. George is working with that. He should hopefully have an update for us very soon. I've scheduled a meeting with my nice lady out on the corner of Wawinit and Quidnet Road, Ms. Kuratech, to go out and visit her site. And my primary goal for that visit is to take lots of pictures so I can come back with lots of pictures to show you guys the extent of her violation, and we can issue out her enforcement action after me visiting the site and her explaining what she did, because a lot of times it's difficult to tell what she does other than cleaning out her understory, but I was in concern that she's maybe using a chemical product to assist her or do something in her wetland. So I'll be out with her on her site to look at it. Tomorrow, I'm going out to Prox Court to look at this chicken enclosure that was put up.
Still there, huh? Chicken still there?
A new one, or
It's a new one. And to go out and see what it is. I was going to recommend just enforcement on that tonight, but since the applicant in that case came in to visit me today, because I had left a message for their consultant and their attorney that I was going to recommend issuing out an enforcement action. She came by and invited me to come see it. I said, well, it's not going anywhere. Let me come take pictures with you, and then I can bring them back, and you guys can actually see what you'd be issuing out an enforcement on. If we can't get rid of it in the interim, it may be something that's simply taken down or simply removed.
Well, as someone who's recused myself from this issue, I've been told that they're down to one chicken, one, and two. and two, to go easy on them because an owl swept down and took their dog the other week.
Their dog.
No way.
Yes.
Must have been a little dog, because
It
we
was a
don't
little
have that
dog.
big owls
And
out
what
here.
kind of owl?
Well, I didn't get the particulars, but I got this from one of the gardeners.
Because we don't have like great horned owls around here.
Could have been a snowy. Could have been a snowy.
I haven't heard any reports of
It
those
depends on what
recently.
kind of dog. I would
Or a
say
chihuahua.
if it were
The
a
Maltese or
if
something.
it
Yeah,
were a
it
really
is
small
a
dog,
Maltese.
Yeah.
a barn owl would be.
Did somebody see this happen? Was it a hawk?
Well, she did tell me that they're down to 2 chickens because a hawk came and killed one of the chickens, and that's when she decided to put up the fencing. So
And it
I want to go see it and see the extent of it again.
go.
And I'm going to meet her on the site to do it. So at the next meeting, I will hopefully have full photos and reports to give you of those two.
Okay,
Yes.
so,
I just scheduled my visit around for tennis.
are we ready to move on to emergency certs?
We don't have any
Pick
of
up
those.
my Wall Street Journal and bring it over for a contract with you, because I have my Wall Street Journal delivered there.
Okay, guys, let's come back into some kind of a order here. I can't go out like this, you know.
It's chaos.
Brought you a
Where's your gavel?
Oh, boy. Okay, reports, CPC.
CPC, we met, and I've forgotten when the annual meeting is, sorry. So I'll ask Jeff to pass the details out. I would encourage you to come. And we discussed the deadline for this year's applications, which is September 9th. And we would like to have more applications than sort of applications from the usual suspects, worthy as they might be. And so I thought I'd read out to you the section that sort of covers it, and which is on the Times website. And it goes, the committee makes recommendations to town meetings for the acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space, for the acquisition and preservation of historic resources, for the acquisition, creation, and preservation of land for recreational use, for the creation, preservation, and support of community housing, and for rehabilitation or restoration of such open space, historic resources, land for recreational use, and community housing that is acquired or created as provided in this section. So spread the word around, you know, because we had 2.5 million last year. And for instance, you know, dealing with the harbor as a historic asset, you might be considering that.
About it.
Well, it's
I'm
just
not going
this-
to broach that subject because I've already had my argument with Ken about work in the harbor counting as preservation of open space, and he and I went round and around about it, and
Well-
was told that it was not eligible for CPC funds by the chairman. So unless
Well,
it's
since this
clear,
is being taped, I won't say anything further. To be continued. So I wouldn't give up quite so easily if I were you. Then there's also other, you know, under other provisions you might be able to apply. So, well, you know, it is taxpayers' money.
It gets filed and then reviewed by the board, which applications would be
Right.
taken on. So if
Right.
you filed something,
Yeah. So,
you're talking to one person.
but so I would like you to talk to, you know, friends and people who are involved in the community, because it's fairly wide purview, and it's a useful resource. So, and I'll ask Jeff to send out to you when the actual annual meeting is, which is going to be at the Dreamland upstairs, I think. And of course, there will be food as well as sort of a discussion of what's available in terms of resources. So, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the date. So, all right.
Okay, MPNEDC,
Nothing relevant.
mosquito control.
Nothing new.
Anything else? Okay, commissioners' comments.
Keep on biking, Ernie.
I don't have much choice, do I?
Any
Thank
more
you.
than new iPads?
yes, matter of
I
fact,
know.
I do have new words. So the IT director, Linda Rhodes, today told me that she has put together the requisition for, she just wanted to know the exact number for new iPad Air 2s that you guys should be getting very soon. So, because I explained to her, I was like, they're really just carrying them around to hold down the stack of papers that they have to carry around now because their iPads don't work.
And if ours like don't charge, we just
5 times a night.
return them to you.
So I'm like,
Oh, no.
we're gonna go buy new.
We'll be taking all of these ones back.
Get
You'll
more
get a
pictures,
new one.
it just kept shutting off,
So,
then
yeah.
it just goes off
But-
and off. Then it starts
Yeah.
up on its own, then it goes off.
But notice, I haven't brought mine.
You can run something like that. You charge like a
Okay. Anything else? That's,
I just have one thing.
okay, Mr. Administrator.
Just real quickly, since this was an election of officers night, this is also the same night that I always throw the bone to you guys that if anyone wants off their other appointed committee, that now would be a good time to bring that up. But if everyone's happy where they are, then they can stay. Ashley's already busy.
Yeah, I'm stuck.
Stuck to the
It's a
mosquito control.
5-year committee.
Yes.
Oh,
2021. I don't think it's swappable.
No, that takes, you have to get appointed by the board of selectmen. The only other thing I was gonna add, and I'm just totally spaced it out. If someone's interested, it's about to come up again for other committees, not to pack anymore onto anyone's schedule, but the Shellfish Management Plan Implementation Committee is gonna get re-advertised again. If anyone is interested or someone is interested in passing that along to people they may think may be interested, it'd be nice to get that off the ground and moving forward. I know we've had a lot of good luck with the fertilizer committee in the last year. That'd be nice that another one of the town plans and initiatives that has gone without a committee now for a couple of years gets filled. And a lot of things have been happening on that plan, but it's just been happening internally and to get that kind of off the ground and moving and in the right direction. So I'll put my shameless plug in.
So if you call it Shellfish Plan Implementation Committee, the acronym would be SPIC.
Shellfish Management Plan Implementation. Well, that's it.
That's a nice job. Okay, so, I think we're done here.
Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you, Ernie.
Thanks, Ernie. It's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it.